Hey, everybody. Welcome to the last Bourbon Talk live stream before the 2024 presidential election. Brand new bottle of 1792. Feels like it's in order. Thank you for everyone coming out. This has been, well, I about said the past couple of years leading up to this election have been incredibly stressful. Cheers. But the truth is that we have been in this now for roughly a decade. We've been dealing with rising authoritarianism, Donald Trump as a political demagogue, and the outright further radicalization of the Republican Party for so long now. Tonight, we're going to focus on the 2024 election and beyond. The questions are about what should we expect? The questions are about where are we going? And we have a slew of those questions, and I want to say thank you for first of all for coming out and also for asking these questions. They are always appreciated. But I want to take a second before we get into this to talk about this in a little bit of a different fashion than what we're going to really delve into tonight. The fact that we have now spent the past decade being not just politically minded and politically aware, but feeling activated and feeling absolutely immersed in this terrible political environment in which the right has consistently used fear mongering, conspiracy theories, and weaponized abuse against us, which is part and parcel of authoritarianism. It is meant to grind us down. It's meant to kill our spirits. It's meant to convince us that what we're experiencing now is just the way of the world, and it's the way that we're going to have to live for the rest of our lives. That takes a toll. I made an audio over at my Substack this weekend talking about the steps that we need to take to fortify ourselves as we are preparing for Tuesday's election. Obviously, because you care, you are feeling some anxiety and fear and dread, and I totally understand that. But in moments like the one that we are in now, and of course we're doing this live stream on Sunday, November 3rd, which means that we are 2 days out from the 2024 presidential election. There are only so many moments in a political environment like this where we can take a breath, we can compose ourselves, we can fortify ourselves, and we can begin to replenish ourselves. So I want to start first with an acknowledgement before we get into any of these questions, before we talk about the election, before we talk about what happens after the election and what it is that we must do. I want to say that the way that you have felt is not only valid, but completely and utterly understandable. You have been plunged into an environment in which you are surrounded by hate speech. You are surrounded by threats of violence. You are surrounded by calls to make the world not just a worse place, but a more dangerous place, a much less human and a much more exploitative place. So we have to take a moment to acknowledge that. We have to take a moment to actually sit with the reality of this environment that we are currently living in and that we have been living in now for years. And Amy in the chat says fight or flight, which is exactly right. I talked about this in the Audio from a Collapsing State podcast that I made over at my Substack this weekend. That feeling that you are in danger, I hate to tell you, but it is true. I do not want to lie to you. We're going to talk in a little bit about people who have been lying to you for years. I don't want to tell you that this is not a dangerous environment. It absolutely is. We are watching a class of people construct around us not just in an environment of exploitation and not just in an environment of oppression, but in an environment in which they are creating an active apartheid state within the United States of America and attempting to make it global. I wish I could tell you that what is happening ends on Tuesday. And of course, we don't even know that we're going to have the results of the election on Tuesday. We don't know if we're going to see weeks upon weeks worth of legal maneuvering and attempted coups. We have no idea what's going to happen on Tuesday. We don't. What we do know is that regardless of who wins on Tuesday, regardless of whether or not we know the results on Tuesday or not, regardless of whether or not there is another coup attempt, the people and the movements and the incentives that have created this moment of constant activating trauma and abuse, they're not going to say, "Hey, congratulations, you won an election. We're done." That's not how any of this works. Again, something I say quite often is that we are told consistently that the essence of democracy, small d democracy, is to go to the voting booths. And that is in no way, shape, or form true. That is the most minimum level of democratic participation that you can have as a citizen and as a person. An election is a mile marker on a longer road. There is so much work that needs to be done. There is so much healing and change that needs to be realized in order for us to get past these things, in order for us to live in a different world, in a different environment. That is all to say that if you are walking a road and you are constantly being attacked by predators, wolves, I some sort of predator that is coming after you and putting your life in danger. You have to find the moments to rest and prepare yourself for the next move. Right now, right here, as we're speaking, and tomorrow, these are the last moments for us to have a breath and to compose ourselves and to think about what it is that we are doing right now and where we are going. This is a long, long road. And as many of you who have been showing up to Bourbon Talks or listening to the things that I've been saying or the things I've been writing, you obviously are interested in creating change in this world. You are obviously interested in realizing something better than this because you deserve better than this. You deserve better than an election like this. You deserve better than this political system that you currently are living under, better than this economic system you are living under, better than this world that you are currently living in. You can have that. And you deserve that. The people you know, the people you love, your neighbors, your children, your grandchildren, your coworkers, strangers that you don't even know, strangers you pass at random in the world, whether it's at the grocery store or driving down the street, people you don't even know their names. They deserve better than this. People in other countries who are being exploited, who are being killed, who are being taken out in ethnic cleansings and genocides, who are being absolutely crushed by this current system that we're living under, they deserve better. And I believe that we are going to get there. For all of the talk that we're going to have tonight, for all of the questions about this election and everything that comes after, this is not the end of anything, period. And we need to recognize that. We need to realize that. We need to feel it deep, deep down in the marrow of our bones. We need to feel this deep, deep down at our very essences. And as we do this, we have to be serious about it. We have to be intentional about it. We have to fight this fight. We don't have a choice at this point. You could accept this, you could capitulate, you could hide away from it for however long you're able to hide away from it, but I have to tell you, if someone like Elon Musk is in control of the federal budget, and also if all of these tech fascists get their way, and also if we continue to create an apartheid state that only serves wealthy white men, there's not a whole lot of hiding from that. And you're not even hiding from it now. At your job, you are being exploited. At the grocery store, you are being exploited. In all facets of your life, you are currently feeling the crush. And by the way, I'm sitting here listening to wind roll through, just heavy, heavy wind. It's like feeling the edge of a storm, hearing that wind, feeling the force of it, and knowing that on the other side of it, a whole lot of hell is coming. You're not hiding from it. You're not going to hide from it. We have questions here about how this is going to affect the rest of the world and people who don't live in the United States of America. You can't buy a ticket out of this. You can't renounce your American citizenship and go elsewhere and hide from it. This is the hand that we have been dealt. I didn't want it. I don't think you wanted it. I just got into this fight like 8 or 9 years ago. I didn't expect to be doing this. My entire life changed. Got completely tossed upside down. I didn't want it, you didn't want it, but guess what? It's here. And going back to the metaphor of being on the road surrounded by predators, you may not want to be in that situation. And my God, you hear that whenever you see movies where people are like running from a threat and they say, I don't want this. I don't want this to happen. I know you don't. I don't want it to happen either. I don't want to be involved in this. I don't want this to be what our lives and what our country is like. But they are. This is the life that we have. This is the country that we currently live in. This is the current political environment and cultural and social environment that we live in. So, right now, before we get to Tuesday, it's a moment to take stock of where we are, to take a breath, and also replenish ourselves. And here's a cheers to that. Now, I have a whole slew of questions. And the big question, and Maureen, a fellow writer, asked me this. Maureen said, who will win this thing? It's Kamala, right? So here's where I tell you my understanding of the 2024 presidential election as it stands. I would be lying if I told you I knew what was going to happen. There are tons of people who are willing to tell you that they know exactly what's going to happen. And by the way, they will get an unbelievable amount of clout and engagement on social media telling you they know what's going to happen. No one knows. And one of the reasons why no one knows is because, first of all, we all lived through 2016. People were certain then. I'll be honest with you. I was covering the emergence of Donald Trump as a political demagogue. I was covering the rise of the MAGA movement, and I didn't yet know the truth about the United States of America and our culture and our environment. I thought I did. I thought I was plenty pessimistic enough, but I still believed that the system was going to chew him up and spit him out like so much bad food. So we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen on Tuesday. I can tell you that in the past week or so, things have felt like they have been shifting. And we'll talk more about the poll out of Iowa here very, very shortly. But I will tell you that as a person who has phone calls with strategists and party members who keeps a very close eye on this stuff, there is a perception that things have started to shift. I can tell you that women are righteously pissed off. I can tell you that vulnerable communities and minority populations have been genuinely pissed off and understand that Donald Trump is an existential threat to their continued lives and safety. I can also tell you that Donald Trump is a decrepit, decaying corpse who is barely able to make it through a political rally without losing his mind and saying some of the most vile bullshit that you have ever heard. That doesn't mean he won't be elected, but I can tell you that the energy and the feeling that is taking place in our politics right now, it tends to give you the feeling that things are shifting. I've started to see internal polls out of swing states, out of a national look. And I can tell you that the polls that I have seen, they look pretty good. But also, we're inundated with one poll after another that tells us that this is a toss up. Well, guess what? We don't know very much about polls anymore. 2016 taught us that. Nate Silver hasn't had a money worry in his life since then because he was able to predict certain things. But I can also tell you another thing, which is a lot of the people who are pushing these polls, they're overweighing Republican results because they don't want another 2016 in which their polls were shown to be faulty. We do not know. I feel right now as if I had to put money on it, I would say that Kamala Harris wins and Donald Trump tries to steal it through legal means. That's where my gut is, but that's my gut. I do not know who is going to win this election. I do not know which way this is going to go. I can sit here and tell you my expert opinion based on the data and the anecdotes that I have heard. I am encouraged by the fact that Donald Trump's ground game, as run by Elon Musk, has been piss poor and counterproductive. What happened with the America Super PAC is instructive in terms of understanding how incapable these people are of running a campaign that we believe should be successful. But as I tell people all the time, in 2016, Donald Trump couldn't even get yard signs out to his supporters. So we don't know. I do think the overturning of Roe v. Wade, as well as the continued nonsense that Donald Trump has peddled, I think people are tired of him. And maybe that will be one of the deciding factors. Maybe people are tired of politics being something you have to constantly pay attention to. Maybe people are tired of this current environment. God knows that I am, and I assume you are as well. But I can't tell you definitively what's going to happen. I wish that I could. I wish that I could sleep at night knowing that I'm telling people things that they want to hear, but I can't do it. I just can't do it. So we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen on Tuesday. And as I talked about in my Audio from a Collapsing State podcast on my Substack, radical acceptance means understanding reality as it is. We could engage in a bunch of fantastic magical thinking right now. I could say, hey, everybody, it's in the back. Get you some good sleep tonight. I hope you had a good dinner. Hey, hang out tomorrow. Make sure you go out and vote, obviously. But hey, this thing's great. We don't know. We have absolutely no clue at this point. I wish I knew. I wish people are talking about Mike Johnson and the little secret with him and Donald Trump. Like, I wish I could tell you I have a little secret. I know this thing's in the bag. But in an actual election such as this, we don't know. My gut says Harris wins this thing. But also, if you came back from the future and told me that Donald Trump wins this, I would believe you. I don't know. I don't know. The only thing that I can control is myself. I can talk to people on a live stream. I can send out materials. I can organize. Those are the types of things that I can deal with. I can help educate people. But deep, deep down, I have to understand that I can't control what's happening on Tuesday. And I can only make sure that I am well, that I am prepared for what is coming, and also that I have my eye on the future. That regardless of what happens on Tuesday, I am prepared to meet the next stage of this struggle. And that involves self-care and self-understanding. I have to understand what it is that I care about and where it is that I want to go. I have to be able to make sure that my energy stays up. I have to be able to make sure that I'm able to do the work that I need to do. This right now is a moment to breathe. It's a moment to catch our breath. It's a moment to fortify ourselves and prepare for what is coming. I said this on that podcast, over on my Substack. Take a moment in the next couple of days. Tomorrow would be a great day. Tonight, you're watching a live stream with some Yahoo who's talking on YouTube. Take a moment to write down what it is that actually matters to you, what your principles are. I think if you're watching this, that you are probably an anti-Trump partisan in that regard, and you want a better world. Okay, what do you want that world to look like? Why do you oppose Donald Trump besides the fact that he's disgusting, besides the fact that he is an absolute creep and monster and authoritarian and an inherent fascist? What is it about all of that that you stand against? It's not just that he's disgusting. And quite frankly, it's not because of his physical appearance, which I say what you want. I don't think that's a reason to dislike somebody. Like, say what you want about the way he talks or the way he behaves. That's totally, totally fine. What is it about Donald Trump as a human being and a political entity that you oppose? What is it about him that offends you so much that you put so much of your energy and time and passion into opposing him? So spend some time with those principles and those ideas, because regardless of what happens on Tuesday, those principles and those beliefs and what it is you want to see in the world, that will still exist beyond Tuesday, regardless of who wins the presidential election. Again, we have to stop seeing these elections as the end all be all and the final thing that we can do as individuals engaged in small d democracy. It begins with us. And then we have to push back against the way things are. Because regardless of what happens on Tuesday, the problems that got us here, the conditions that got us here are still going to exist. And we have to change them. Because I don't know about you, but I've been watching the past 4 years. I watched before that with 8 years of Barack Obama. I was told that everything was going to get better, but guess what? Those conditions have continued to get worse and make our conditions and our environment and our political world and our culture and our lives worse. So the fight goes on beyond Tuesday. I can't tell you who's going to win. I can't ensure that Donald Trump is going to lose this presidential contest. But I can tell you one thing for certain, and that is this thing is going to continue one way or another. And we have to be ready for that, and we have to be prepared for that. On this note, Suzanne asked, if Kamala wins, we don't touch the fundamentals of the world not working, essentially running on economics and not humanitarian concerns. If we don't create a system of change on that front, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, or we even stay as we are. An apocalypse, here we come. If Trump wins, that could be what shakes up enough to organize ourselves to give us the best chance for humanity's survival. What thinks you? So I think at the heart of Suzanne's question, I agree deep down with a sentiment that's being expressed, but I do not believe that Donald Trump being elected is going to be the thing that shakes us out of our stupor. In part, I lived through 2016 and then 2017 through 2020. I saw that Donald Trump was one of the most destructive presidents that the United States has ever seen. He flirted around with authoritarians. He made sure that the wealthy were served. He increased intentional inequality. And I mean, we got a couple of marches out of it. But what did our institutions do? Our institutions bended with him. Why? Because a lot of America and its foundation is based on authoritarianism. And it's fine with it whenever it helps to serve the bottom line, which is one of the things that frightens me the most, which is that even some of the biggest liberal bastions that we know, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they they're not really, like, terribly opposed to Donald Trump and what he stands for, are they? There's a reason why over the last few years, we have seen a lot of liberalism start to move towards authoritarianism or become authoritarian curious at the very, very least. It's because our economic system demands it. We're in a period of American decline. We are seeing possibly the end of American empire. That puts a lot of pressure on things. And also, it's almost like in Star Wars, where they're in the trash compactor and the walls are coming in. Eventually, when the walls come in enough, people start climbing over each other. They'll drown each other, they'll kill each other. That's what liberalism oftentimes will happily embrace. They'll say the things that you want them to say. They'll say a bunch of like very, very kind, empathic things, but a lot of those things are very much gestures. This country is moving to the right. I do believe that there is a danger that if Kamala Harris wins, that much like when Joe Biden was elected and promised us everything was going to be okay, and Republicans are going to wake up from from their nightmares and their fevers are going to break, and hey, don't worry about it, everything's going to be fine as long as you vote for Joe Biden. Hey, I have a feeling I'm going to be able to reach across the aisle. How'd that work? It didn't work. The question is, under a Kamala Harris presidency, will a lot of these authoritarian things be given a gloss or a sheen? We've seen over the past year as these awful, awful actions in Gaza in the Middle East have been like sort of whitewashed. Well, we don't really want them to happen. Well, guess what? They're still happening. I don't think that if Kamala Harris wins, that suddenly people are going to wake up from these fugue states. I don't think that suddenly authoritarianism will be destroyed. I said on my a recent article that I wrote on my Substack, I said, I'm voting for Kamala Harris because I am voting for the environment that I want to work in. A Donald Trump presidency, it's almost like we're driving towards the edge of a cliff. Well, guess what? A Donald Trump presidency is stomping on the gas and making sure that we go over the cliff. A Kamala Harris presidency is not a stomping on the gas unless we let it be a stomping on the gas. Personally, the work that I'm engaged in, and I'll talk more about that because someone asked about it. The work that I am engaged in, I would rather organize against a Harris administration than I would a Trump administration. Also, by the way, with Elon Musk wanting to have unelected, unaccountable control over the United States budget and promising to cut upwards of $2 trillion. Do you know what happens when you cut $2 trillion from the government budget with just like an oligarch who doesn't know how to do anything? You're in that compactor. And people, their survival instincts are going to start kicking in and they're going to start climbing over one another and sacrificing each other. I would much, much rather organize in an environment in which Kamala Harris is the president and we are trying to change the political system as it at least continues to function. That's where I come from. I want this country to recognize that neoliberalism is a disaster. I want people to understand that capitalism has so devalued human life that I don't know if y'all remember a couple of years ago, we went through an epidemic in which we fed people into the jaws of that disease. I want people to recognize that I'm connected to you and you are connected to me. And not only should we take care of one another because we're on this spinning, floating rock together, but because it's ethically the right thing, morally the right thing. And by the way, deep, deep down, if you want any of this to work, it's the only thing that keeps this system working. Intentional inequality and the growing gap between people who have wealth and power and those who do not, it destabilizes everything and it leads to the environment that we are currently in. And I'll tell you one more thing that keeps me from believing that this is true. I do want this country and this world to get better. I do want us to be better. I do want us to live better lives. I want us to maintain what progress we have while expanding beyond it because we deserve better than this. I am not willing to take a gamble with the lives and the well-being of the people who are going to suffer under a Trump presidency. I have a lot of people of color in my life who are my friends. I have a lot of gay and trans people who are my friends. I have a lot of women who are my friends. And even if I didn't know anybody from any of those groups, w the poor, which that's my family, if I didn't know any of those people, I would not be willing to risk them. What could happen under a Trump presidency, particularly in this fetid, poisonous cesspool of an environment that he feeds into? A lot of lives would be in danger and a lot of lives would be lost. I don't want to play around with that. I would much rather live in an environment in which I am organizing against a Harris administration than I would a Trump administration. Cyborg Unplugged asked, if Trump wins, do you expect them to hit the ground running with their mass sweeps, etc., or will they need a ramping up period? So I was talking about this on the Muckrake podcast. I think it was the last episode, the Weekender. And, I was saying, because I think actually the way we talk about immigration in this country is, first of all, disgusting, but also I think it's flawed. I want to remind everyone that the reason why the quote unquote immigration problem doesn't get solved is because the wealthy don't want it to be solved. The wealthy use immigrants to pay them for cheap labor, cents on the dollar, and also because they don't have to give them benefits, and also because they're absolutely terrified to speak against them that they might be deported or discriminated against. They are the most vulnerable, exploitable group of people in the United States of America. They don't want to get rid of that. It is absolutely essential to our economy as it is structured right now for the wealthy to have their pick of immigrants to exploit in their businesses and in their labor. So that isn't what's going to happen. They're not going to probably do this big mass deportation because I have to tell you, I don't think the economy wants it. I don't think the major stakeholders want it. What they want to do is to create an apartheid state in which that exploitation of immigrants is even worse. They want to create an environment in which immigrants who are in this country are absolutely terrified at any given moment of either being deported, imprisoned, hurt, or murdered. That type of an apartheid state is what this new authoritarian movement wants to exploit. And so I do think that there will be deportations. I do think that there will be sweeps. I think we will see violence against immigrants. But I think it will be different. And by the way, Donald Trump lies about all this stuff. I mean, I haven't been to the border wall in a while, but you know what it is. I do think that there will be shows of force. I do think that there will be examples made of people as they're being rounded up, as they're being brutalized, as they're being thrown into camps. And by the way, like the existence of camps is a foregone conclusion if Donald Trump wins the presidency. That will happen. And I believe, and this is really, really sad to say it, it will either have bipartisan support or you will watch the Democratic Party say that they don't support it and not really stand in the way. Why do I know that? Because the Democratic Party has followed the Republican Party to the right when it comes to immigration. And also, I was around during the first Trump administration when I watched the Democratic Party say consistently, we don't agree with what's happening, but not really put their own necks on the line to change it. I also lived during the Bush administration, and I saw how the Democratic Party jumped on board and helped create a global war that killed over 1 million people. Also, corporations could gain access to more labor, more markets, and more resources. So I think that there will be violence. I think that there will be a constant threat of white supremacist attacks on immigrants. I think the environment will be absolutely poisoned with Donald Trump and his administration. And by the way, all the donors around him who have created this controversy, they have made it an issue that we have to talk about all the time, as opposed to human dignity among immigrants and the fact that they should be protected and valued. So instead, I think the environment will get worse. And what we'll see is an apartheid state in which these people will be more or less totally and utterly exploited and oppressed. And by the way, you said, will they need a ramping up period? Donald Trump and the people around him are not interested in doing things well. They want to do them when they want to do them, which, by the way, is one of the reasons they're inherently fascistic. They don't want to deal with pushback. They don't want to have to deal with logistics. They just want to carry that stuff out. So I think it'd probably be pretty quick. You would start seeing a lot of people being rounded up, put into camps. Some of them would be deported, but it would be more about creating this reality in which immigrants are not just second class citizens. They're just not. They are not considered human, which, by the way, we've seen where that's gone before. And as global climate change gets worse, I have to tell you, kids in cages at that point, it'll be much worse than that. We've already seen these fascists forcibly sterilize immigrants. As resources start becoming more scarce and as the borders start shrinking, and as these people have been living under an apartheid state, you better believe it will only get worse. Ariana says, I just want to say I have thoroughly enjoyed you and people like Sarah Kinsey are calling out these people that you've called hope peddlers. I feel like there are so many scammers trying to tell people what they want to hear, and my God, does that hurt things. Yeah. So hope peddlers have become like one of the major targets of my ire. I personally, I'm optimistic. I think that we are going to beat back authoritarianism. I think we are going to re-energize democracy. I think that we're going to have a better future and a better world. That fight that I was talking about in the beginning of this live stream, I think we're going to win that fight. I happen to believe, because I've looked at history and the cycles of history and the movements that have come before us, the human race fought its way out of feudalism. Do you know how incredible that is? If you like, we hear about feudalism sometimes and people think about knights and kings or whatever. Like, it was one of the most authoritarian environments that we have ever seen. Like, not only did they control what they did and their work and their ability to live, they controlled reality. They created a synthesis between wealth and power and religion, the likes of which we had almost never seen. They kept a huge swath of the population illiterate and superstitious. They had all the wealth, they had all the resources, they had all of the might, and humanity fought its way out of feudalism. Do you know how incredible that is? We are going to win this fight, and so I remain optimistic. I can tell you that. I can't tell you that I know for sure that we're going to win this fight against authoritarianism. My God, do we have a lot on the other side of us? Do we have a lot of work to do and a lot of struggle to realize? But I think we're going to win this thing. And for that, by the way, cheers to beating back authoritarianism into a better, more human future. But I cannot stand these people, influencers, personalities, pundits, you name it. I cannot stand these people who, for years now, have been part of the resistance, who have made God knows how much money off of opposing Donald Trump and telling you, hey, the institutions are going to stand, right? The FBI. The FBI is going to take care of them. This special prosecutor is going to take care of them. Hey, guess what? This politician, they've got Trump's number, right? Did you see Nancy Pelosi tearing up the State of the Union? Oh, he's running scared now. Telling us now that Kamala Harris has this election in the bag. I can't stand it. I have been so disappointed by how many people who have built their careers and reputations and fortunes off opposing Donald Trump, who have not stood up for what is right, who have not said, hey, guess what? People don't deserve to be absolutely destroyed and run roughshod over and ethnically cleansed. I also can't stand the people who make all of this money and all of this influence by not looking into the face of what capitalism has done, and also the fact that the Democratic Party, and I'm sorry to tell you this, the Democratic Party is not perfect. The Democratic Party for the past few decades has gone along with neoliberalism. They have cozied up to corporate donors, and they have absolutely turned their back on a lot of people who have deserved their help and support. Telling everyone right now that this election is in the bag and that, oh, after election day, we'll all be fine. I find it repugnant. And listen, I I I can't do it, and I won't do it. I refuse to go along with that. I do. I it makes me nauseous. It makes me nauseous. I would much rather talk about what is actually happening and what needs to be done. I would much rather be in the struggle and be in the fight than deal with this in a way that is full of magical thinking. And you look at what has happened, and you look at how cults of personality have sprung up around everybody, not just Donald Trump, and that they now behave like MAGA. They now share the same aesthetics and the same hero worship of MAGA. We should reject this. We should be better. We should look at this thing and call it what it is. Period. Chris says, I am concerned the Seltzer poll is being used to get people not to vote, getting people thinking Kamala has won this already. I remember similar polling for Hillary in 2016, and voters got complacent and some did not vote. We have to vote like Trump can still win this, which he can. Yes, he still can win this. The Seltzer poll, for those who don't know, is actually one of the most accurate polls that we have in this country. It has been dead on, not just in the last presidential election, but in other elections in recent history. I believe there's a possibility that Kamala Harris wins Iowa. I think there's a possibility. I don't think it's going to happen. There's a possibility that Kamala Harris could win Kansas. There's a possibility that she takes Arizona and Georgia. I mean, these are all actually possibilities. I think we should greet the Seltzer poll with an understanding that right now, compared to these other polls, a lot of these national polls that we do know have overweighed Republican results and numbers, we could see it as an outlier, or we could see it as one of the true markers of what's actually happening in this race. I don't know. But I don't think that this poll was concocted in order to try and keep people from voting. Although going back to the last question in terms of hope peddlers, I do think that there are a lot of these hope peddlers. I don't think that they're being malicious, trying to drive down turnout or trying to get people not to vote or participate, but a lot of what they're doing is pushing that idea. It's hard to vote in the United States of America. I'm expecting that I'm going to have to wait in line on Tuesday for a few hours. I'm prepared for it. But guess what? I'm lucky. I'm self-employed. I can take that time. I can wipe my calendar and wipe my slate free, and I can go do that. Most people can't. So to go ahead and tell them, hey, this thing's in the bag, it gives some people the ability to say, well, maybe I don't need to go. It seems like this thing is going to be fine. I don't think that those hope peddlers are doing that on purpose. My God, if I found out that was true, I would lose my ever loving mind. But I do think that they have given that sort of an idea. By the way, LH says, what about early voting? I I like to go to the voting place. I like to go in there. I like to talk to the poll workers. I like the experience of going into the ballot myself. I know it'd be a whole lot easier if I did early voting, but no, I'm gonna go in person. John says the polling is all over the place and the electoral college is fundamentally a toss up, with Trump being supported by the Heritage Foundation with loyalists and his vindictive nature, aka coming in with an enemy list. What are you doing to prepare for the likelihood that some type of law enforcement will be eventually looking for you and others who have and continue to oppose him? First of all, John, I appreciate you asking this question. And I assume that, you were asking it because you're concerned about my well-being. I appreciate that. Um, I'm of a couple of minds here. One is that when I first, um, gained a platform back in 2016, I I was targeted really, really hard for a couple of years. I had multiple break-in attempts at my house. I was stalked. I received near constant death threats. Personally, I had to make a choice back in 2016, which was, am I in this or am I out? Like, am I like the water's getting very hot. Am I going to jump out of the water or am I going to risk it and stay in? I decided to risk it and stay in. And the reason that I did it is because I don't know that I could have lived with myself knowing what I knew and not continuing. That was a choice that I made, and quite frankly, I'm still happy I made that choice, but for people who've been watching these live streams or whatever for years, I mean, I have aged. I I have aged. Like, there's so much more gray in my beard and in my hair. I have a lot of miles on my tires right now. I can't spend too much time thinking about what the consequences are going to be for me and others. I talk to, other people who do this work, and to a person, they have all said that they have to think about this as well, understanding that we have been very loud, very vocal, and very public in the work that we have done. And it's something that you have to accept. You have to understand that in a growing authoritarian environment, that if you are going to speak against it, particularly as a public figure, that it comes with the territory. The only thing that I can do and the only thing that I can control is to tell the truth as I understand it. That's all that I can do. And so that's what I will do. I take great care to protect myself. That has had to be something that has been a focus of mine. I've had to every, everything from security systems to personal protection devices to, I mean, I've basically had to sort of go underground a little bit so people don't know where I'm at. That's what I can control, but at the same time, the risk is worth it. I do think that in a lot of ways, the die has been cast. Um, I can't go back and make all of my books go away. I can't get rid of all of the interviews that I've done. I can't get rid of all of the posts that I've done. Um, that's out there. That's out there. So that's where I am. And I will continue to protect myself the same way that other people like myself are continuing to protect ourselves. But you also have to do it with an understanding that what you are doing, this comes with it. Otherwise, you're just posting, which I happen to believe that a lot of people are just doing. They're just on social media saying things because the algorithm rewards it or because there's money to be made or whatever. But going back to what I was saying about radical acceptance and seeing reality where it is, like I had to come to the realization back in 2016 as things were blowing up. I had to come to the realization that like anything that I am posting, anything I'm writing, anything that I'm publishing, any live stream that I'm doing it now with the understanding that I mean what I'm saying. This is not a performance. This is not a grift. This is being an individual who sees the ethical and the moral gradient of what is happening. And what comes with that is the inherent danger. And I hate saying that, but I can tell you, and by the way, I really appreciate I'm seeing people in the chat saying that that's concerning. I appreciate you caring. Um, I can tell you, I'm okay, and I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay because not just that I'm careful, but because I I'm okay and I'm at peace with what this is and what's been happening. So, John, I appreciate the question. I've got two questions that are related, and I'm going to read them both here at once. This is by Colleen. What do you think we are likely to see from Trump and his supporters post election in the case of a Harris win? What would it look like on the world stage with a Trump win? Matthew, with the race seemingly so close, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what a Trump win and how it might impact those of us living overseas. So, first things first. If Harris does win, I mean, I think there's a distinct possibility of there being violence on election day. If it is a close thing and then there is a back and forth, I listen. Trump is not going to throw up his hands and say, "You won, congratulations, let's move forward." That's not going to happen. There will be election denial, and I can only imagine that it will be exacerbated by the fact it's the second election in a row that they believe has been stolen from him. So as a result, I think it would be totally reasonable to expect the state of things to be more turbulent. Because why would they not be? If they have now seen two elections in which the quote unquote deep state has taken, their votes from them, like obviously they're going to be more pissed off and they're going to have more of a reason to be violent. One of the things that we have been watching for a while and I've been warning about is a lot of these people are like honestly waiting for an opportunity to be violent. They have fantasies of violence. It's not just Donald Trump saying like this person could be killed or this person should be imprisoned, whatever. The reason why Donald Trump has had such a hold on them is because he has fueled an environment in which they live fantasies. Trump supporters live these fantasies where they're strong patriot warriors just ready to carry out a revolution. January 6th was such a fantasy. They thought they were going to overthrow the government. They tried to. A lot of people that support Donald Trump, they really truly believe a fantasy about themselves that they are just waiting to be strong men who are going to make things right. It's the way they dress, it's all the guns that they have, it's the iconography that they wear, the way they talk about themselves, the way they talk about the world. So yeah, I do think that there is a distinct possibility on election day and beyond of some violence. I think that is a distinct possibility. In terms of the world stage and what will happen around the world, you know, I talked about this a while back. There is an international authoritarian movement that is fueled by this corruption and intentional inequality that I've been talking about. Right now, as the American order is is starting to fray, as American influence is starting to wane, we are watching, and I'll try and keep this brief. We are watching as capitalism is trying to jump to another host because America has too many freedoms, too many protections, too high of a standard of living. Those things are going to have to fall by the wayside. Capitalism as a system of inherent incentives much more prefers authoritarians. It much more prefers environments where dictators and strongmen, make things happen. That way people can be paid less and capital can continue to accumulate in fewer and fewer hands. That international authoritarian movement right now is manifesting in the axis of countries like China, Russia, Iran, North Korea. India's moving over there. Israel's flirting with it. Saudi Arabia's flirting with it. Those two countries, Israel and Saudi Arabia, really enjoy America's support, but they're over here flirting, making sure that they get the best of both worlds. If Donald Trump wins, that current situation puts America in 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 a moment where Donald Trump's infatuation with dictators, including the leaders of the countries that I'm talking about, Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping, Kim Jong Un, it puts the leadership and the reaction within the United States to a worsening environment of hostilities. It puts America in the position where we suddenly have the opportunity to be aligned with those people. And all of a sudden, and by the way, we totally do not understand World War II, what happened and how it occurred. In the lead up to World War II, the United States of America had a huge fascist and Nazi movement within the country. Franklin D. Roosevelt was able to guide us beyond that, answer some of the material conditions that led to fascism and Nazism. And as a result, we were on the Allied side. Guess what? The UK was similar. They had a huge fascist and Nazi movement in the UK. France as well. They took over whenever the Nazis took over France. It was not a foregone conclusion that the United States of America would be on the side of the Allies. Very easily, the hostilities and belligerence of Adolf Hitler and the Nazis and the fascists might have been answered with, good luck. It was at the start. So, what we're now seeing, and Scott just said global oil is the problem. It's one of the major problems for sure, because they do not want to get off of oil and they don't want to answer global climate change. And that's one of the reasons why all of this is boiling up into a toxic stew. We could find ourselves in the United States of America allying or soft allying with these axis of authoritarian countries. And I want to make something very clear. This is the type of setup that leads to a world war. When an order such as the American order under the American empire in the American century, those countries are very interested in overthrowing the American empire and replacing it with the authoritarian agenda that they currently embody. That is a perfect environment for a world war. That's how we got to World War I. That's how we got to World War II. In both cases, they were trying to overthrow the British-led empire, which eventually led to capitalism, jumping from Great Britain over to the United States of America. This is a situation that could lead to World War III. It could. I don't think it should. I think there are plenty of ways that we could avoid World War III without capitulating to these authoritarian assholes. But that's not going to happen with Donald Trump. It also is one of the reasons we need to reject neoconservatives like Dick Cheney, Alberto Gonzales. This is one of the reasons why it makes me sick when people are like, is George W. Bush going to endorse Kamala Harris? And meanwhile, what is Harris talking about? Creating the most lethal fighting force in the world. Neoconservatism is back. It has found a home within the Democratic Party. We must reject that. And one of the things that we have to learn from in the lead up to World War I and in the lead up to World War II, there were plenty of leftists who were trying to keep those wars from happening so that, and they wanted to do that by changing the material conditions that led to World War I and World War II. We could avoid that conflict. We could avoid a world war that would kill untold millions, if not billions, of people. And by the way, also accelerate global climate change, also destabilize politics and cultures around the world. We could have avoided World War I and World War II. We could have avoided the conflict, gotten rid of fascism, authoritarianism, and the absolute destruction of accelerated capitalism. Could have done that. We could still do it. And we must do it. But that's what will happen, is that the world will continue to get to a place where this conflict is going to continue to grow, and the United States of America and its Western allies in Germany, France, Great Britain, they might find themselves in a situation where they are taken over by GOP like political parties, and we might not even have that bipolar world. We're coming up on 1 hour before we get to the next question. Actually, I saw Joe asked, what is conservatism? I will answer that after the hour. We got a lot more questions. I really appreciate y'all coming out. Good crowd. We're 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cheers to a better future. Neoconservatism is the political ideology that animated the Bush administration. Basically, it is an idea, and if you get some time this weekend, you don't have anything else to do, go check out Strauss, the major ideologue of conservatism. The idea that there needs to be some sort of a myth at the heart of Western society, and that myth can be religious or it can be nativist, whatever it is. In this particular iteration, it was the idea that the United States of America was a city on a shining city on a hill. The idea that America was exceptional and that we should go around the world and make sure that other countries are free like we are. But in truth, Strauss and other neoconservatives, they they weren't interested in actually democratizing the world. What they saw was that they needed to collect a bunch of resources to continue and accelerate American power and dominance. And so they could do that by talking about needing to destroy evil, invading places like Iraq, killing every evildoer, you name it. It was the use of fictions and mythologies to go ahead and carry out the oppression of global dominance. And we're seeing a lot of that right now by the old cast-offs of the Republican Party. This is one of the reasons why Dick Cheney endorsed Kamala Harris, because this strain of right-wing Trumpism is a different animal than neoconservatism, which was still lodged in liberalism, at least with its aesthetics and the way that it carried itself out. This authoritarian strain that currently has control of the GOP, Trumpism, this authoritarian international movement, it is different, but it was birthed out of that. And so those old neoconservatives like Cheney and Bush, they have now found a home either within the Democratic Party or orbiting around the Democratic Party. This is one of the reasons why Bill Kristol is now a major influencer with the Democratic Party. Rick Wilson, a lot of these people who helped the Republican Party become the Republican Party, those people were always doing their work in order to realize a neoconservative environment. It's one of the reasons why the Democratic Party is becoming more conservative as time rolls on. So the idea, David Frum, that's exactly right. So neoconservatism has now been largely embraced by the Democratic Party, which now puts us in a situation where the Democratic Party is a conservative party. By definition, they are trying to conserve the progress of the 20th century. They're not too interested in pushing things forward and giving new rights and protections. They're very interested in protecting what came before and also relying on the military industrial complex and the idea that America has a right to go around and define how other people act and do things based on our own interest. And then on the other side, from that neoconservatism, you have right-wing authoritarianism. And those two, that's the essential nature of our political battle right now. You'll notice that even though we keep hearing about the quote unquote left, we're not actually dealing with any sort of leftist ideas. There's only a couple of people who could even be considered nominally leftist in positions of power, and they're not able to actually realize any projects. So what happens is we are actually between a conservative party that has liberal, tolerant aesthetics, the Democratic Party, which says, "Hey, we care about people. We want people to be safe." Well, that's fine. I mean, that's just common sense that people deserve to live their lives and not live in fear and be crushed under the boots of authoritarians. That's a conservative party. The Democratic Party has largely become a conservative party. And then you have the GOP, which has become a far, far right authoritarian party. And as a result, we're sort of stuck in the middle without anybody really advocating for major change or a push to the left. And we keep getting told, like, the New York Times is left. Are you kidding me? Not even close. So we live in a simulacrum of a political duopoly. Doesn't mean that the Democratic Party is all evil or that you shouldn't vote for them at times or caucus with them at times, but it means that we need a major realignment. The good news in all of this, before we get to the next question, the good news in all of this is that leftist ideas are actually incredibly popular. It's funny, we keep getting told it's a coin flip nation, right? Red and blue states, the Electoral College is going to decide this. By the way, the Electoral College needs to be abolished. But the truth is that people do believe that billionaires should be reined in. They do believe in expanding rights and protections. They do believe that intentional inequality is disgusting. They want to get rid of minoritarian institutions like the Electoral College. They want to rein in minoritarian institutions like the Supreme Court. If you actually put on paper leftist ideas, they are wildly popular. It just so happens that neither of the political parties actually discuss it. If you'll actually notice, the debate environment in the United States of America is all predicated on right wing ideas. This is why you go into a presidential debate in 2024 or a vice presidential debate, and it's like, what are you going to do about immigration? Oh, we're discussing right wing ideas and issues. We're not actually talking about how to move forward or how to make a better, more equal life. We're actually having discussions that are all predicated based on right wing talking points and reality. It's a weird situation, but it's what happens. It's what happens, particularly when you have concentrated wealth the type that we do. Jordan says it's like pro wrestling. Absolutely. It's a lot like pro wrestling. Next up, we have Andrea. Got a little bit of ice. Do you think if Trump loses and Kamala Harris is actually inaugurated in January 2025, will he run again in 2028? Or do you think a complete loss this time will kill his viability as a candidate? So I'll say this. If I had to put money on it, I wouldn't say that Donald Trump arrives in 2028 as either the incumbent or as a challenger in a state to run, or might even be alive at that point. We're watching Donald Trump absolutely collapse in real time. If he is capable of running in 2028, whether he's the incumbent or whether he's a challenger, he will absolutely do that. Donald Trump is like, the old idea, I know it's not completely true, but the old idea that like a great white shark has to continue moving and eating constantly. He has no choice. He's on a path that he doesn't have particular control over. Donald Trump doesn't actually want to be president of the United States of America. He wasn't actually interested in winning the presidency in 2016. He was shocked completely. He wanted to use it as a way to raise his brand and become a media mogul. As president, he wasn't interested in doing anything. He was lazy, ill-informed, dispassionate. The only thing he wanted was to, be treated with all of this pomp and circumstance. More or less, he wanted to be a mascot. He didn't actually run anything. Like, his administration had its little personality conflicts and all these little soap operas in it, but the Heritage Foundation ran the entire thing the same way that they're trying to run it again with Project 2025. He will keep running as long as he is alive and he is able. The question is whether or not the Republican Party will welcome him. If he is alive and able, they absolutely will, because he is the perfect puppet and avatar. He is a battering ram that makes it possible for them to keep the support of the pseudo-populist MAGA movement, which is all about capturing millions upon millions of Americans and deflecting away blame from the wealth class who control Donald Trump and control him as a political entity. So in that regard, they rely on him. The question is, what will the Republican Party be like? And as I've continued to tell people, they will only keep growing more and more extreme until politically they have been decimated. They are going to keep pushing more and more towards Christian nationalism. These conspiracy theories are going to continue to grow. The thing that concerns me is when it merges with militarism. And I just talked about being on the precipice of possibly another world war. We also have a generation of politicians and Americans who went through the global war on terror, which is what I was discussing just a little bit ago. You don't have a generation that engrossed in war and global war that it doesn't change the way they operate and have consequences later on. JD Vance is really scary for a variety of reasons, including the fact that he is a puppet of tech fascist. Also, he's got some of that militarism in him. Josh Hawley is incredibly scary for that reason. The moment that they move towards right-wing militarism and they have a reason to do it, whether or not it's a faux war against Mexico, which they have been just absolutely champing at the bit to make happen, possibility of war with China, and by the way, some of those things will be show wars, some of them will be simulations of war. I've got a question in a second about Iran that could possibly be on the menu. Will the GOP reach that point by 2028? I don't know. And I want to be honest with you. I want you to remember what it was like for Barack Obama to be president starting in 2008. I want to remind you how white supremacy and conspiracy theories around white supremacy went through the roof. If Kamala Harris, as the first, not just female president, but the first female woman of color to be president, you are going to see patriarchal insecurity go through the roof. You are going to see so much racism. You're going to see so many conspiracy theories that are going to rise from that. And there will be movements like the Tea Party that will continue to try and move the Republican Party to the right. The question is whether or not they'll find purchase with Donald Trump moving forward after he's lost 2 straight elections, or if they'll find another avatar, particularly a strongman. I think Josh Hawley has a lot of potential in that regard, particularly for the fact that he employs a faux leftism that answers a lot of the vacuum that the Democratic Party has left behind. JD Vance does the exact same thing. Meanwhile, they're just absolute puppets of the wealth class. So, what will that party look like in 4 years if Donald Trump loses? You have to imagine they will be more extreme and that they're going to continue to move on that trajectory. Here I have a question from Janelle. What is America looking like in the next 4 years from your view? Will we be at war with Iran, for example? So, 4 years from now, I want to believe that for a variety of reasons, including a lot of what I have talked about so far, including a lot of the material conditions that I have been discussing. If those things don't get answered, we will be more extreme, more polarized, and more divided. And I have to tell you that international authoritarian movement I was talking about, including the axis of Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and a lot of these other states, like you are going to see a lot more of wars like the war in Ukraine, like the war in Gaza, the war in Lebanon. You're going to see a lot more of those things if these conditions are not addressed. On top of that, I know that there is going to be a movement within the United States of America that is going to attempt to change the status quo. Will that take the shape of labor unions? Maybe. Will it take the shape of a popular protest movement against some of these wars and actions and atrocities? Possibly. Will it be a generational movement, a la the 1968 movement in France? Maybe. I don't know. On top of that, and Ray is exactly right. Ray says climate change is going to make this worse. It absolutely is going to make this worse. Living conditions are going to continue to deteriorate. You're going to see more and more disasters, more land, more climate refugees. You're going to see all of the issues that we're dealing with now, but turned up a couple of knobs. That is why we must change things. That is why we must answer these material conditions. Because, and by the way, Colleen says confrontations over food and water. Absolutely. If we don't deal with these things right now, They are going to continue to get worse and worse and worse. And the worst parts of this conflict that we are currently experiencing are only going to throw more and more gasoline on the fires. That is why it is imperative that regardless of who wins on Tuesday, whether it's Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, that is why it is imperative that we absolutely struggle against the status quo and demand better. We change things because we are currently on a trajectory that is not just unsustainable, it is destructive and apocalyptic. We have to change it. So the question is, what is America going to be like in 4 years? And that's the $64,000 question. Are we actually going to start moving in the right direction and start figuring out the answers to the problems that plague us? Are we going to change this disastrous status quo? And by the way, for the record, and I'm going to talk more about this in just a second, that doesn't happen without actual struggle. That's what would have to take place for things to actually change. Or are we going to continue to watch this thing deteriorate? And as it deteriorates, are we just going to have these problems get worse and worse? That's what we're facing. So the question is, I don't know what America is going to look like in 4 years. I know what it could look like, and I know what it should look like. And those are the questions. Two related questions. We've got 4 total left. Du Chateau, do you think it would be possible for the election to be thrown to SCOTUS? And Olivet, is there time to expand the Supreme Court before that group does more nefarious shit? I got bad news for you. They're always doing nefarious shit, so no, there's no chance of expanding it before they do more nefarious shit. Guarantee they're doing nefarious shit right now. Do I think that this election could be thrown to the Supreme Court? Absolutely. And there's an army of right-wing lawyers who are paid by some of the most belligerent and malevolent members of the wealth class you could ever imagine. The same ones that control the Trump campaign, who control the Heritage Foundation, you name it. Those people are absolutely employing armies of lawyers to create lawsuits that are designed intentionally to send this election to the Supreme Court. They are going to try everything they can to get this in front of the Supreme Court that they have stolen and that they have rigged. Before I answer whether or not the Supreme Court's going to be changed, I want to say something to you watching this right now. I said before, in these days before the presidential election, this is a moment to catch our breaths and to decide who we are and where we're going. I want to challenge you with something. I want you to make your mind up in the next couple of days before we get to Tuesday. What are you going to do if the Supreme Court gives this election to Donald Trump and he has not won it? What are you going to do? We've seen this happen. The election in 2000 took place. The Republican Party stole it. By the way, by a lot of the same people who are now being lauded as heroes and hashtag resistance warriors. The election was stolen in 2000. And do you know what happened? Nothing. People just went along with it. We can sit here and say, people aren't going to put up with this. And maybe that's true. Are you going to be in the streets? Are you going to protest? Are you willing to risk your jobs and your livelihoods in order to carry out mass strikes and protests? Seems like before we get there is a good time to make up your mind about what you're willing to put on the line in case the Supreme Court tries to steal the election of 2024. Mo says there will be no protest. That's a real distinct possibility. Do you know how I know that? Because 2000 happened. Because Roe v. Wade was overturned and everyone thought there would be so much happening in the streets. We saw some marches. We saw some groups coming together. But in large part, it was seen as, oh my God, this is awful. Just wait until the election. If we live in an environment in which this election is stolen by the Supreme Court for Donald Trump, I want to believe that people will stand up and say this is too far. And somebody just said we are too afraid, and Mo says too many drones, too many phones. You're exactly right. And by the way, that is bipartisan. That is an environment that has been created in which the wealth class has continued to militarize the police. The tech fascists have created methods of surveillance that make us absolutely terrified to do anything, lest we suffer major, major consequences, including the loss of our lives. In an authoritarian environment and in an authoritarian culture, that's what you're supposed to feel. You're supposed to say, oh my God, I hate this, but I'm not getting involved. I used to think when I was younger, the only way that the Nazis could possibly ever have the power that they had was that they pointed a gun barrel at everybody. They didn't have to. They created an environment in which they pointed enough guns at enough people, and they killed enough people and incarcerated enough people that a lot of people said, fine, I'll put on the armband, or I'll fly the flag, or I'll throw up the salute. The question is, what will you do, and what are you willing to do if a stolen Supreme Court that is solely dedicated to be the puppet and the tool of the wealth class, what will you do if they attempt to steal this election? Probably a good question to answer for yourself in the next couple of days. And I can't tell you what to do. I can't tell you to be at a certain place at a certain time and take a certain risk. That's not my question to answer. I know my answer, but you have to make that question. And the other question, will the Supreme Court, can we expand it? How much talk have you heard about expanding the Supreme Court? You've heard Joe Biden talk a lot about, well, he's disappointed in the Supreme Court. And even for like one day, you heard him say, well, we might need some court reform. Have you heard Joe Biden talk about expanding the Supreme Court? Have you heard a Democrat talk about expanding the Supreme Court, at least one who is a presidential candidate or like a major national figure? You haven't. You know why? Because the current status quo depends on one thing, the illusion of legitimacy. This is one of the reasons why Donald Trump was allowed to get to the place where he was, is because you have to maintain the illusion of legitimacy. And the moment that you start questioning our institutions, whether it's the Supreme Court, the Electoral College, the makeup of the Senate, the makeup of the House of Representatives, the FBI, the CIA, the moment that you start questioning those things, all of a sudden that legitimacy starts to get a little wonky. If that starts getting a little wonky, then all of a sudden people start asking, like, what else could we do? For instance, I don't think that you just have to stack the Supreme Court. I think you should threaten to stack the Supreme Court. I think you should. I don't think that goes far enough. I have come to believe that the Supreme Court should be an elected position. I think it's absolutely batshit insane that we have people who get appointed for the rest of their lives and never suffer any type of democratic accountability. I also point out that the Senate used to be appointed as opposed to voted on. The progressive movement made that change. Guess what? The Supreme Court should have the exact same thing done to it. Those people are not priests. Those people are not the elected few by the universe to be priests of the law. We should be voting on Supreme Court appointees. We should have control over the Supreme Court. They should not be able to simply tell us like what direction the country should go into. And you know why? We have basically been told that the Supreme Court is impartial. That's bullshit. It's never been impartial. The Supreme Court was created, and by the way, gave itself the power over the Constitution. In case you didn't know, they weren't given that to begin with. But the Supreme Court was created to serve the wealth class. The few times that we've actually seen the Supreme Court protect people or do the right thing have been aberrations. We should not just stack the Supreme Court and expand the Supreme Court. We should change them fundamentally to the point where they don't even just have not just lifetime appointments. We should change it to the point where they are democratically accountable. And this is something that we need to do. They have been captured and they are doing what they were intended to do by the founders, which is to serve the wealth class. I got 3 more questions left. And by the way, thank you again, everybody, for coming out. You've been really, really good. Tommy. Tommy says, appreciate your breakdown of the possibility of a World War III type showdown. I was left wondering about Musk, his possible control over the budget, and what it would look like if he and other tech oligarchs were actually confronted with a movement to change things. So, in studying history, in writing The Midnight Kingdom and American Rule, and in learning about actual history, one of the things that I came to understand is that things don't just materialize. Change doesn't just happen. Again, like authoritarians don't simply accept election results or progress or change. They have too much money and too much power on the line. They fight it tooth and nail. The tech fascists, who are the industrialists of the late 20th and early 21st century, we saw them uh, preceded by the industrialist of the early and then later on the 20th century. We saw that they continually partnered with fascists and Nazis. They were the ones who gave them all of the wealth and all of the power, and then they went from there. They're not going to just simply, take regulation. They're not going to, see the redistribution of tens of trillions of dollars turned around, which, by the way, for people who don't know, starting with neoliberalism, this country has intentionally redistributed tens of trillions of dollars from the working and middle class to the wealthy few. They're not going to just, accept that. They're not simply going to deal with the rise of a new radical labor movement. They're not going to deal with a small d democratic movement. They're not going to simply say, wow, there's a lot of you. We're just going to let this happen. Do you know what happens when there's a movement against industrialists? Do you know what happens? History tells us there is violence. They bring out Pinkertons. They bring out private militias. They also, a lot of the time in American history, and you might not know these stories, they relied on the National Guard and the U.S. military. They relied on all of these institutions as weapons of the wealth class. And so what has happened? We saw a lot of bloodletting. We saw a lot of tragedies. We saw a lot of loss of life. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that actually realizing real change, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it's easy, and I'm not going to sit here and tell you that it will not be without tragedies and without brutality and without violence. This system has to change. It's either going to get worse or it's going to get better. And if it does change, it's going to take a clash of ideas and a clash of civilizations. So, yes, if Elon Musk and the other tech industrialists who are the modern robber barons, I'll answer that what a Pinkerton is here in just a second because they still exist, which is wild. If they actually, in terms of drones, which by the way, all of that is about expanding state power, which serves the wealth class. There are going to be clashes. But guess what? There are going to be clashes even if you don't have those things. Like there's going to be so much violence even if it doesn't happen, you might as well fight on your feet. A Pinkerton, by the way, was a private police officer or official that corporations and the wealth class would bring in to undermine labor unions, to fight them, to sow discord, those types of things. Just absolute pieces of shit. Blake, if Trump loses, do you think Republicans are done with Vance on the national stage? I've said this before. JD Vance is one of my least favorite human beings on the face of the earth. I think he is an embarrassment and he is a wonderful indictment of how terrible a person can be when they are obsessed with money and power. He has thrown everyone who has ever cared for him overboard. He has just fed them into the machine. He is a Judas. Absolutely repulsive. And seeing this person absolutely shit the bed as the VP candidate under Donald Trump, first of all, has been enjoyable for me, but never, ever, ever underestimate how far a puppet of people like Peter Thiel and Elon Musk can go. JD Vance was bought onto the Trump ticket by those tech fascists. He was basically bought into the position of the heir apparent of MAGA. Do I think he's done if Trump loses? Probably. I don't know if after what he did to Springfield, I don't know if he will be able to win re-election to the Senate from Ohio. But I'm not going to discount somebody who is that cold and bloodless and ruthless. I believe that JD Vance would be able to claw his way up into a position of power and maybe even become the avatar of the post-Trump Republican Party. I'm not going to discount that. But if I had to put my money on somebody, I would put it elsewhere because he is one of the most transparent, most disgusting human beings that I've ever seen come onto the political scene and public arena. Last question. James asks, I heard you mention on your Audio from a Collapsing State podcast that you're working on some project in 2025. Can you talk about it? A little bit. I can't talk too much about it. I'm really looking forward to sharing more about this. I'll just say that I am working with an organization that is dedicated to realizing the change that we've been talking about tonight. That is interested in ending the era of neoliberalism, ending intentional inequality and exploitation, and working to change this status quo. I'm really excited to talk to you about it. 2025 is when this really, really takes off, and just call it Project 2025. Yeah, probably not. Probably not. But I'll share more about that in due time. Before we get out of here, again, thank you everybody for coming out. A reminder, if you want more of this stuff, you can go over to my Substack, Dispatches from a Collapsing State, my new podcast, Audio from a Collapsing State. I'm really, really proud of the work I'm doing there. I hope you'll consider becoming a subscriber. The latest book, Midnight Kingdom, talks about how we got to this point and why it's gotten to this point, and also, I hope, finding a way out of it. This is going to be a long few days, and after that, it's going to be a struggle. Again, the best advice I can give you, take these next couple of days to take a breath and figure out who you are and what it is you believe. You inspire me constantly. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate your support. I believe long term, we're going to win this struggle. And I think we're going to have a better world in the long run, but it's not going to be easy. The Muckrake podcast, by the way, my podcast is going to have an election night special for Patreons. That's patreon.com/Muckrake podcast. We'll be going live at 9 p.m. Eastern on election night. And I don't know how long we're going to go, but you'll get analysis you don't get anywhere else. Yeah, and I'll do some live streams as the situation demands them. Here's hoping we don't have another 2020 on our hands, but let's also be prepared for what's coming. We're going to make a better world. We're going to win this fight. Cheers to you. All right, everybody. Be careful.